Good morning. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I had a really nice weekend down south in Moab with family and several agents from the KW Midvale office. Did some river rafting and stuff, so it was a great time. So as you know, over the past several weeks, we've been talking about listings. Those agents that are listings focused and have a strategy around taking listings or picking up market share and dominating the market right now. So last week we talked about how to start putting together your listing presentation using the tools in eEdge and backing it up with evidence using the lore report. And today we're going to talk about something I think is really critical in preparation for doing your listing presentation or really owning your listing consultation, and that's talking about two specific topics, which is communication and problem solving, which will lead into next week's conversation around closing techniques. So to me, these are the two most critical skills for an agent or realistically any person to learn. In fact, this is one of the things that I think is the most important things for my kids to learn is I really believe that if you can be a great communicator and a great problem solver, you really have the ability to make a huge impact on the world and the people around you. So learning how to communicate effectively, through that communication, identifying problems that need to be solved, and then strategically putting together a win-win solution around those problems is such a, just really puts you in a power seat and puts you in a power position of really being able to, one, stand out in a crowd, help more people, leave a bigger footprint on this world, which, as you know, through these conversations, you know that everything we're talking about, all of these business principles go much deeper than just taking more listings, helping more buyers. All these business principles are really life lessons. And so I want to jump into this. I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you through a little bit around this conversation. All right, so today we're going to be talking about communication and problem solving. And one of the things I really liked here is this quote that says, "We navigate our whole lives using language." I mean, just think about waking up one day and not being able to talk to anybody, or if you didn't understand what anyone was saying and you didn't have the ability to communicate, it really changes your experience of that day. So change and improve your language, and you will change and improve your life. This is how to manifest your own reality. Think about how often you hear the way someone's talking, and you immediately can extrapolate or have a better understanding of kind of how they grew up, where they grew up, how they approach the world, how they view obstacles. And as you start paying more attention to your own communication strategies and problem-solving strategies, you're going to start to perceive and have a better understanding of how the people around you are communicating and how they perceive the world. And you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to really embrace the way those people are tackling the world and the communication issues of the day and decide that's who you want to be around, or you're going to start thinking about, man, there's a lot of negativity around the people I'm surrounding myself with, and you need to upgrade talent, upgrade the people you're hanging out with. So let's go through this on a little bit deeper level there. So relationship business. So it's, as you know, and you've heard me say this over and over again throughout these conversations, is being a great real estate agent, this is a relationship business. This is not a transactional business. People are coming to us not to buy a product, but to buy an experience. And so it's all about creating the experience with someone. And relationship equals conversation, meaning the level of our conversation determines the level of our relationship. So the quality of our relationship is really determined by the quality of our conversation. The better we are at having great conversation with people, the easier it is to build a long-term relationship. Now, we have to remember that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. When we think of communicating, all we think about are words coming out of our mouths, but communication really is a two-way street. And oftentimes the best communicators are the best listeners. And this is a critical piece of us learning how to be better communicators with our clients is asking great questions and sitting back and listening and then going deeper with those questions. And it's all about building rapport. So what is rapport? Rapport is an unconscious bond that happens when people interact with each other. Most of us are unaware of it, and it just happens naturally. So that being said, where most people are unaware when rapport happens, I think it's critical for us to be so observant and paying attention that we are aware when rapport happens. We have to strategically accelerate rapport with our people. Where if we have time on our side and we're in a social engagement and we engage in conversation with someone, that's okay to let rapport build or not build depending on your connection, likes, and interest in that scenario. When we're working with clients, it's critical that we strategically accelerate rapport, and again, using communication strategies of asking great questions, getting a better understanding of how they're wired, understanding what's important to them. And then from there, we can make the connections, help connect the dots, and rapport can be strategically accelerated. It will still happen naturally, but on an accelerated course if we're strategic in our communication. So one of the things that I like to talk about is the process of communication. One of my favorite stories about that I use to illustrate the process of communication is it's much like giving or getting a gift. One of my favorite Christmases of all time, I don't know if you were like me as a kid, Christmas Eve, I could not sleep. I had so much anticipation, so much excitement about Christmas morning that I would lay in bed and not be able to sleep. So the other thing, I grew up in a house where we were constantly some rambunctious kids, always playing jokes on each other. And one Christmas Eve, I thought of this great idea. My parents had a storage room where everything that wasn't being used in the house was kept in this room. It was just packed full of things. Most things we probably didn't even need to keep, but we kept them in the storage room. So not being able to sleep, I climbed into the storage room and I found this really old pair of my dad's cowboy boots. Now these cowboy boots had been beat to the ground, but I went in, pulled out these old cowboy boots, wrapped them up and said, "To Mason," which is my little brother's name, "from Santa." And I snuck upstairs into the room where Santa left his gifts, found where Mason's gifts were, and I strategically placed these cowboy boots there to be found the next morning. Well, now my anticipation for Christmas morning even increased because I was so excited to watch everyone's reaction when he opened this unexpected present. So the next morning, as we went around in the circle and everyone was opening their presents, it became Mason's turn and he picks up these cowboy boots, not knowing what they are, and he starts to open them up. And I see my parents look at each other like, "I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?" And as he unwrapped this present of these old cowboy boots, my reaction was I thought it was hilarious that he looked at it like, "Oh, thanks." Like he didn't quite know how to react because there was no sincere excitement about it, but he didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so he acted excited about these cowboy boots. So what does that story have to do with communication? Is the process of communication is very similar to giving someone a gift. I love to give gifts. I'm not a very good gift getter. When I get gifts, it's hard for me to give the reaction that people want to give, but I love giving someone a gift that really strikes a chord with them and gets them excited. So this is the process of communication. It's much like giving a present in the fact that if you really know somebody and you know how they're wired, how they tick, and what's important to them, it's really fun to give a present that they're going to be excited about. So it's all about the preparation of finding out exactly what it is they want, wrapping it up in a way that they're going to be super excited about. It's the method of delivery of that present. But that's really, generally speaking, as far as most of us think with communication. All we think about is taking the message, giving it to the person. But that's only part of communication. There's still another piece of the puzzle that has to happen for full communication to happen. And that is the person has to unwrap the present, and then they have to understand and get excited about the present and react to the present on the other side. So think about this in relation to communication. If I have something that I think is really relevant to communicate to one of my clients, I have to determine, how do I encode this message? How do I take this very relevant, important message and encode it and wrap it and prepare it and deliver it in a way that they're going to best receive that knowledge. Now, last week we talked a lot about how someone's wired using the DISC analysis, and a lot of that is determined of how I'm going to prepare this message for them to receive. So I need to make sure that once they receive the present and they unwrap it, that what they're seeing or how they decode the message is exactly how I intended it to be understood. Now, this is really similar to the kids' game telephone, where you sit in a circle and whisper in the ear of the person next to you a message, and they pass it along person to person all the way to the very end. And it's not very often that the person at the very end can communicate the message or say the message exactly how it started with the first person. And that is exactly what happens to us in real estate, is a lot of, or in business in general, is oftentimes we feel like we communicated something very well because we quickly took something, we threw it out there, we communicated it, and it's not received and understood in the same way that we intended it when it left our lips. And so we have to intentionally look at what is the message? What is the relevance of the message? How do I deliver it in a way that it's going to be received in the way that I intended to be received and helps push my initiative forward, and make sure that they decode it in the same way that I intended it to be decoded. So this is the process of communication. Now, you may be thinking that this is going too deep on the process of communication, but I'm telling you, as you put some thoughts into this, the better we get at communicating, the better agents we're going to be, the better we are going to be about building relationships, and we're going to notice all the relationships we do have, the level of those relationships are going to increase in our world. So let's jump into this a little bit and take that communication piece now. And oftentimes we're going to use those communication strategies to solve problems. That's really what we're in the business of as real estate agents, is we are in the business of communication and problem solving. There's a lot of moving pieces that need a lot of communication around them. Throughout the process of that communication, different problems or obstacles or issues are going to arise. And it's our jobs to communicate and find solutions to those problems that create a win-win and push the initiative through to the finish line. So we need to get really good at what's called the needs analysis. Now, this is a prescription for pain. So really getting clarity on someone's needs, what needs to happen. Now, notice I'm saying needs and not wants, because they're two very distinct things. Oftentimes my kids say, I need something. They don't need it. It's not necessary for them to live, but it's really something they want, right? And it's determining what really needs to happen beyond the wants. Now, a lot of times with our clients, we're able to achieve someone's needs and their wants, and it's a double whammy, and we win in a big way. But getting clarity, if we're just focused on what they want, a lot of times we miss what needs to happen. So we need to get really good at what's called the needs analysis. Now, the very first objective of a needs analysis is to identify a source of pain. However, we don't want to focus on the pain itself. This is generally what people want to focus on in their conversations, is they want to talk about the pain. Oh, it's so hard to move. Oh, it's going to be hard to pack all the boxes. Oh, it's hard to leave this house where we raised our kids. Now, are all those points valid and have validity to that person? Yes. But they're talking about the pain and not the source of the pain. So we need to get really good at acknowledging what they're identifying as the pain, and then asking really good questions to identify what is the real cause of that pain. So for example, if someone's talking about how difficult the whole process is of having to sell their house, we have to ask great questions, and maybe we identify that the real source of the pain is there's some real anxiousness and anticipation about the job change or the job transfer that is caused the move for them. Because if we can identify the real source of the pain, then we can actually build a relationship, because we can ask great questions. We can now strategically accelerate that rapport, come from a place of understanding that everything we do for the real estate transaction is really about accommodating and relieving that source of pain and making a job transfer or whatever it is. So we have to identify the source of the pain. Another great example of this is oftentimes when we get under contract on a property and issues arise through the due diligence period, either through inspection or financing, they love to really talk about how mad they are about the buyer asking for us to repair this or that or whatever it is. And that's what they want the focus to be. And we have to be able to strategically go back to and draw on previous conversations, because we have strong rapport, back to the original source of pain to say, hey, realistically, increasing the amount of money on the home warranty for a home warranty or making these repairs for $800 is much less pain than not moving forward to hit your timeline based on the underlying pain that we identified through the needs analysis process. So learning to ask great questions, going three deep in the needs analysis is really critical. And what I mean by going three deep is every time I ask a question, a lot of times I'm getting a pre-prepared response to that question. An example of this is, oh, tell me a little bit about why you want to make a move. Oh, because we just think it's time to move on from the house and find us a new place. So real surface level answer. And I want to go deeper because I want to find out if there's some underlying issues of why they're selling the house, because people aren't, particularly if you haven't built that rapport yet, they may not be super excited about telling you that we can't afford the house anymore, or we've had a death in the family and we need to generate some money to pay for this, or whatever it is. We need to be able to ask great questions. So a lot of times I'll follow up the question with things as simple as this. What more can you tell me about that? And it kind of takes people back a little bit. And then you just got to sit back and let them think, because now they have to actually go internal and think deeper about the answer beyond what they had prepared to tell you. And then I'll even go one step deeper of saying, I think I understand. What more can you tell me about that again? And so now they're going three deep a little, and they're really you're drawing out. And as people draw out deeper answers that have emotion attached to it, this is going to even more accelerate that rapport, because now they're sharing emotional responses. They're having some confidence and trust in you, because now they're sharing statements that have emotion tied to them, which is really solidifies that relationship and helps build rapport. So identifying core values these are some really great follow-up questions. So after you've identified the true source of pain and why they're wanting to make a move or whatever it is, we can ask great questions that actually tie the emotion to the statement. Okay, help me understand, why is that important to you? Or what's so important about moving right now? So it's not why do you want to move right now, but what is so important to you about moving right now? And then as you identify what it is, you can ask the follow-up questions here. A lot of times, for instance, we want to make as much money as we can. Help me understand, what would netting $60,000 off your home right now do for you and your family? How would that help your current situation? What would you do with that money? Then you can ask these. So these are just really good questions that we don't naturally think to ask, but they're all about helping them draw out the emotion. And as you have a better understanding of why these things are important to them, it becomes important to you, and it increases an instant connections with your people and builds a relationship that's going to exist far beyond the closing table. And it's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to want to refer you to their friends and family, because now you're not their agent who helped them. You're a friend that helped them identify what was really important to them, and you helped accomplish it. And then asking the question, what would having X mean for you? What would selling your house by October 31st mean for you and your family? So in summary here down at the bottom, it's that we say, identify the pain, connect the negative emotion to the pain. So once you have identified the pain, saying a simple statement like, that could be really painful for you. Or if we're not able to get this house sold in the timeline that you've identified, that could cause some real pain for you and your family, right? Or that could cause some additional issues for you and your family. So this is important that we get this done. Communicate the solution. This is how we're going to get it done. This is the action we're going to take. And then you got to connect a positive emotion to that action. as we're able to close your home by this date using these strategies and netting you this much money, you and your family are going to be able to do this, whatever it is that they've identified was important to them. So it's connecting a negative emotion to the pain and helping them identify the source of the pain. And then once you've identified the source of the pain, you can help them see that you are the solution to eliminating that source of pain or reducing that source of pain. And then you help them identify the positive emotions that come when that source of pain has been eliminated. And that is where we go in for the close. Now, the trick with this obviously is this is a very strategic way of communicating, but it's got to come from a place of sincerity. Of you've really got to be, number one, be able to do the things you're promising that you can do, that you can really eliminate that pain, that you're not going to be an extra layer of pain to them. So you have to have the ability and the systems in place to be able to tackle and do what you say you're going to be doing. And you have to come from a place of sincerity to make this really work. Real quickly, I want to talk about negotiation. And this is where we're going to wrap up our conversation today, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity to negotiate through a transaction. So once we've built rapport, we have that connectivity. We've now done a really phenomenal needs analysis where because of our rapport, we've got them to open up. We've asked great questions. We've now pulled back the layers. We've identified the source of pain. We've communicated how we're the solution to that source of pain. We've tied in a negative emotion to the pain. We've showed them the positive emotion that comes through us being the problem solver. All through those pieces, now they're ready to move forward. They may have questions that we have to negotiate through at that point, or we're going to have to be negotiating on their behalf throughout the transaction. So it's critical that we understand how to negotiate on their behalf using a strategy called the 3 Ps approach to negotiation. So everything we've talked about up to this point, I like to use a metaphor of as I'm asking great questions, I really in my mind believe that every time they're sharing something with me, it's as if I'm getting an arrow that I now get to put into my quiver that I'm going to be able to use in future conversations, either future conversations back to my client or future conversations with the agent on the other side, and what information I can share and what that information means to getting the objective across the finish line. So that's really about getting clarity on their client's motivation, what their needs are, so that later you can draw back on that motivation. So the 3 Ps approach is prepare, present, position. So this is all about being able to get your client's objective across the finish line. Now, you see here a picture of my oldest daughter, Abby. Several years ago, I can't even believe I was looking at this picture this morning. I can't even believe it's been several years ago, but she had decided, because many of her friends had an Instagram account, it was time for her to get an Instagram account as well. At the time, my wife and I felt like it wasn't appropriate for her to have an Instagram account, so our answer was no, you can't have an Instagram account. But the thing I really loved about what she did here is the next day I found a little letter on my bed inviting me to a meeting the next day at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it was. And intrigued, signed Abby. Intrigued, I show up the next day at that time for the meeting, and I notice my wife shows up as well. She got an invitation to the same meeting. And we walk into the room, and you can see this picture here is she had this little quote up here at the top. She had a little smiley face, a little devil face. And if you look really close, you can see as she had this conversation with us, she was putting up the pros and the cons of her having an Instagram account. So she had really thought through both sides of the equation. So this was a great example of the 3 Ps approach, where she had really done some preparation and thinking through both sides of the strategy, why it was important, why it wasn't important, why it worked well, why we felt the way we did. And she really thought through both sides of it. She put some real time in the preparation for this meeting. The presentation it was really brilliant of her to say, hey, you know what, instead of just saying, hey, I need to talk to you, or I want to talk to you about this again, she actually made an invitation. She set it aside. She created some anticipation or some engagement on our side of wondering what this was all about. As we come into the room, we see the devil face and the smiley face with these little conversation bubbles that were blank. So at this point, we're really intrigued in what this looks like. And as she went through and presented the scenario, she really identified, okay, I understand why you're feeling this way. I want to help you understand why I'm feeling this way. So she did a great job of presenting. And then we went into the positioning of where she outlined specifically what she wanted out of the conversation. She knew what we wanted out of the conversation. And there was some jogging back and forth and positioning until we came to a conclusion or something that we perceived as a win-win, which wasn't exactly necessarily what we wanted as parents or what we felt was right as parents, and not necessarily exactly what she wanted. But through that conversation, we both came to a new place of understanding that we were able to come up with a solution that worked for both parties and we both felt good about. Now, I know this is a silly example about an Instagram account, but it walks you through and illustrates the 3 Ps approach to negotiation. So the trick here is to have very clear preset objectives. Every conversation that you go into, you need to have a preset objective. The better you've done at building rapport with your clients, having that connectivity where they trust you, where you've really extrapolated out their needs and those motivation arrows, you can walk in with a preset objective of what you're trying to accomplish in that meeting. Refer back to that motivation regularly, because people get sidetracked from what really is their needs or their motivation because they want to react to what's going on specifically in the transaction at that point. So you have to be very good at referring back to the motivation and calming them down. This is where your rapport comes in really critical, because your clients cannot feel like you're taking a position against them, but that you're actually taking a position for them. So when you say something to them like, hey, validate what they're saying. Hey, I understand why you're so frustrated that the buyer is asking you to take care of these repairs. I totally understand that, because some of the stuff really isn't that necessary, and they might be asking for more than I think is necessary. However, remember when you and I first talked, and you told me that the most important thing for you in this transaction was having the transaction done by this time so your kids can start school in their new school on time, or whatever that motivation was. It's going to help them sit back and go, you're right, that's more important than this $700 or whatever it is. So refer back to that motivation, ask great questions and listen. Help me understand why you're so frustrated about this situation. Isolate the objectives, breaking down. If any of you have ever watched the movie Chicken Little, any little thing that happens, they feel like the whole world is going to come to an end. We all know a Chicken Little in our world that feels every scenario is Armageddon. The world's coming to an end. This is the worst thing that ever could have happened to me. When realistically, they've taken one new objective or problem, and then they've gone back and regrouped all the problems, whether we've come up with solutions to them or not, and put them all together into one big problem again. And it's critical that we know how to identify what is the real issue, separate all the other real issues, remind them that we've already come up with solutions for previous issues that they're trying to suck back in, and isolate the objectives so that we can handle them one at a time, which is just like taking one small bite at a time. If we take too big of bites, we're going to choke. We can break it down into these small isolated objectives. We can work through this. So negotiation is a critical skill for you to learn. The better you are at communication, knowing your problem-solving strategies, using the 3 Ps approach to negotiation, and taking your emotion out of it and leaning on the emotion of your clients, and helping them not draw out the wrong emotion and attach the wrong emotion to it, but helping them really lean back on their motivation and use the negative emotion to the problem and the positive emotion to the solution is really critical to helping you get that objective pushed forward. So the overline message today, as we wrap up, it is 8:30 now, is if you want to be an influencer, if you want to be a leader. Now notice I'm not saying if you want to be a great real estate agent, because these skills are critical to be a great real estate agent, but if you really want to be a great leader and influencer in life, ask yourself the question, what am I doing today or right now to improve my communication skills and my problem-solving skills? The next question to be asking is, with all of my relationships right now, how would I rate the level of my communication with the people in my world? And what are the real problems that each of those scenarios are facing that I can help solve the problem? those are the people that have the most value on earth, are the people that know how to communicate effectively, not emotionally, but effectively, and can solve problems. Those people are the people I want to be in business with. So the lot we covered today in our conversation today around communication, problem solving, and negotiation. Next week, we're going to talk about closing strategies, which is all these 2 weeks really are in preparation for us to go through the listing presentation and model a full listing consultation for you using these specific strategies. Thank you guys for being on. It's Monday. Bring a ton of energy to the week. Make it happen. Proud to be in business with you guys. Thanks so much.